Even the IPCC's flawed, alarmism-biased process produced the following qualifier in its 2007 report. Quote, "Whether the faster rate for 1993 to 2003 reflects decadal variability or an increase in the longer-term trend is unclear," unquote. Despite the research I cited estimating sea level rise around Tuvalu at between negative 0.8 and plus 0.8 millimeters a year, TVNZ cherry-picks preliminary findings that suggest that sea level rise around Tuvalu is 5.9 millimeters per year. Interestingly, this same research states that global average sea level rise in the 15.5 years to 2008 was 1.2 millimeters per year. These researchers clearly do not accept the post-1993 acceleration asserted by TVNZ. Furthermore, TVNZ acknowledges that, quote, "The paper notes that the rate of sea level rise in the Tuvalu region was not accelerating as anticipated by the community," unquote. TVNZ have no response to evidence that Tuvalu is tectonically sinking, which may explain a large portion of any apparent sea level rise greater than the global average. And even the IPCC does not envisage anything like the major sea level rises required to inundate Tuvalu within decades. For example, under the IPCC Special Report on Emissions Scenario A1B scenario, by the mid-2090s, global sea level reaches 0.22 to 0.44 metres above 1990 levels and is rising by about 4 millimetres a year. Amid the programme's dramatic footage of surface flooding, any mention of the following two key points was also missing. 1. That Tuvaluans are increasingly choosing to live on the most flood-prone parts of their islands. Quote, "Whangawhale Islet experienced greater population in-migration and centralisation beginning in the 1970s. As the population increased, construction took place on vulnerable swampland areas," unquote. And number 2, that coral atolls are dynamic landforms that constantly shift and adjust with coral growth, wave and current action. Any textbook on coral island geology will outline how atolls can build up to match even rapidly rising sea levels. There's even a scientific term for them, keep-up islands. For example, quote, "Reef accretion reached 10 millimeters a year at Iniwatak between 7,000 and 6,500 years before the present." And Alacran Reef off Yucatan is an example with a growth rate of 12 meters over 1,000 years, i.e. 12 millimeters a year. And far from losing their country, natural storm events can add to coral atolls. Cyclone Bibi in October 1972 created a rubble rampart 4 meters high and 18 kilometers long along the eastern side of the atoll. Over time, such banks migrate shorewards, and this rampart is becoming incorporated into the fabric of Funafuti Atoll. It's therefore unsurprising that the latest research is finding that Pacific atolls are standing up nicely to moderate sea level rise. For years, people have warned that the smallest nations on the planet, island states that barely rise out of the ocean, face being wiped off the map by rising sea levels. Now, the first analysis of the data broadly suggests the opposite. Most have remained stable for over 60 years, while some have even grown. Paul Kench of the University of Auckland and Arthur Webb of South Pacific Applied Geoscience in Fiji used historical aerial photos and high-resolution satellite images to study changes in the island surface of 27 Pacific islands over the last 60 years. During that time, local sea levels have risen by 2 millimeters a year on average. In summary, there is overwhelming evidence for all of the following propositions. 1. That sea level globally is not rising by any more than the 2 to 3 millimeters per year that it has since the 19th century. 2. That Tuvalu is not experiencing sea level rise that is alarmingly outside this global average, and any apparent higher rate may be explained by tectonic subsidence, different measurement methods, and numerous confounding factors. And 3, that coral atolls can and do grow in response to sea level rises several times current rates. In contrast, the evidence that Tuvalu is in danger imminently of inundation ranges from the threadbare to the non-existent. It was not good enough for TVNZ to offer up selective, dubious indications of a slight increase in the rate of sea level rise, when what was required was robust evidence of order of magnitude increases. I then urged the Broadcasting Standards Authority to dispassionately view the evidence that both myself and TVNZ had provided, and conclude that there was a legitimate, significant point of view that the phenomenon described in Tuvalu can adequately be explained by natural processes. Furthermore, even if TVNZ had provided evidence of imminent catastrophic sea level rise, which they did not, the alternative non-alarmist significant point of view should have been presented in more than an offhand derisory way, and that in failing to do so they were clearly in breach of Standard 4 of the Broadcasting Act.